I still remember the day I walked into my own penthouse and felt like a stranger in the place I had worked years to earn. The sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the polished marble floors, and yet it all felt hollow, as if someone had drained the life out of my home while I wasn't looking. My heart sank when I saw the note on the kitchen counter, scribbled in my mother's handwriting, "Go stay at a hotel. You can afford it." At first, I thought it was some cruel joke, maybe a prank like the ones my sister used to play when we were kids. But the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't a joke. My parents had taken over my penthouse, the very home I had bought with my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights, and handed it to my sister. She was pregnant, and they insisted it was all for family. But the sting of betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. All my life, it had been the same story. My sister was the golden child. Every achievement of hers was celebrated with grand gestures, every wish fulfilled as if it were law. Me? I learned early that my victories were barely noticed, my hard work a background hum to their favoritism. Yet, I never imagined that my parents would go so far as to take something that legally belonged to me, something I had fought tooth and nail to acquire, and give it away under the guise of helping my sister. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. I told myself I could just move into a hotel temporarily, that maybe this was one of those family emergencies where love is measured by sacrifice. But it wasn't just a temporary inconvenience. It was a statement. A quiet, calculated assertion that they could take from me and it would be justified because my sister needed it. I felt stripped of my home, my independence, and worst of all, my voice. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I ran my hands over the keys that no longer fit the locks, a tangible reminder of my displacement. Memories of decorating the penthouse, of every painstaking choice from the drapes to the artwork, flashed in my mind. Every corner held a fragment of my effort, my late nights, my promotions, the endless hours I had spent building a life I was proud of. And now, without a word, it belonged to someone else, someone who had never had to fight for it. The betrayal didn't just come from my parents, it came from the system of my own family. I had always believed that parents were supposed to protect, to guide, to encourage. But mine had chosen favoritism over fairness, deception over honesty, and now they were teaching me a painful lesson about power and privilege. They made it clear. I could afford a hotel, so why should I argue? My worth, in their eyes, was tied to my ability to absorb their decisions without question. And yet, beneath the shock and anger, a small spark ignited inside me. A quiet, simmering fire that refused to be extinguished by their arrogance or my sister's unwitting smile. I realized that this wasn't just about a penthouse. It was about every time I had been overlooked, every time my success had been diminished. I would not let this betrayal define me. I left the penthouse that evening carrying nothing but a suitcase, a folder of receipts, and a heart heavy with disbelief. Outside, the city lights glittered, indifferent to my loss. But inside me, a plan began to form. A plan that would remind them that taking what was mine came at a cost. For the first time, I understood something my parents had never taught me. True power doesn't always come from money or influence or favoritism. Sometimes it comes from standing firm, documenting every injustice, and refusing to let anyone make you small. And as I checked into the hotel, staring out at the skyline I had once owned, I promised myself one thing. This betrayal would not be the end of my story. It would be the beginning. I spent the first night in the hotel staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every smile, every casual remark my parents had made that suddenly felt like a lie. It wasn't just my penthouse. They had taken my independence, my sanctuary, the one place that was truly mine. And yet, as angry as I was, I knew screaming at them, or storming back in, would accomplish nothing. My parents thrived on control, on guilt, on making me feel small. I needed something they couldn't manipulate. Evidence. The next morning, I started digging. I opened files I had stored on my laptop, cross-referenced emails, receipts, and bank statements, anything that could prove the penthouse was mine. Every step my parents had taken to transfer ownership to my sister was documented somewhere: co-signed forms, notarized letters, even messages they thought I would never see. My heart raced as I uncovered the first sign of fraud: a document with my signature, slightly off, dated after the transfer had supposedly been approved. My stomach turned. They had falsified paperwork. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had crossed the line into outright theft. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear because the betrayal cut so deep, and exhilaration because I realized that for the first time, I had the upper hand. If I could collect enough proof, I could fight back. Not with anger, but with the law. I emailed a friend I trusted, a lawyer who had helped me once with a small dispute, and described the situation carefully, without exaggeration. I attached a few of the documents and waited, anxiety coiling in my chest. It didn't take long for my lawyer to reply. He wanted everything: bank statements, signed documents, messages, even photographs of the penthouse and the locks. I spent hours scanning, compiling, organizing, and labeling everything meticulously. Each paper I added to the folder felt like a small reclaiming of power. Every transaction, every proof of ownership was a brick in the wall I was building around my justice. As I worked, memories of my family's subtle manipulations surfaced. The endless comparisons to my sister, the whispered comments that I was too ambitious or too selfish, the way they always assumed I would give in because I could afford it. I realized that their greatest weapon had always been psychological, making me feel guilty, making me doubt myself. And now, for the first time, I was immune. I had no doubts left, only determination. By the end of the day, the folder was thick, a tangible representation of months of research, sleepless nights, and painstaking attention to detail. I carried it to the lawyer's office, my hands shaking slightly, but my heart resolute. He looked at the stack and his expression changed. There was a brief silence, the kind that fills a room with tension, and then he spoke. "This is enough, more than enough." His words didn't make me feel victorious yet. They made me feel the weight of what was coming. My parents thought I was naive, that I would cry and move on. They believed my anger was temporary. But now the tables were turning. Now their actions could be scrutinized, their lies exposed, and the penthouse, the symbol of everything I had fought for, could be returned. That night, I left the lawyer's office with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. I was stepping into unknown territory, and there was no telling how my parents would react when confronted with the truth. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that justice was possible. I realized that revenge didn't have to be cruel. It could be calm, precise, and undeniable. And as I lay in the hotel bed that night, staring at the city lights, I made a silent promise. When this was over, they would understand that their favoritism and manipulation had consequences. They had stolen from me, underestimated me, and assumed my compliance. They were about to learn something they had never truly understood. I was not someone to be taken lightly. The next morning, my lawyer called me early. His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of something serious, something that made my stomach tighten. "We're moving forward," he said. "I've reviewed everything. Your parents crossed the line legally, and we have the evidence to prove it. I've already sent notice to the bank and the property registry. They've frozen the penthouse until this matter is resolved." I couldn't breathe for a moment. Frozen. My penthouse, my sanctuary, was technically still mine, but I had never imagined it would come to this. I felt a rush of vindication, but it was tempered by a deep, simmering sadness. This wasn't just about a building or a luxury apartment. It was about trust, about family, and about the people I had once believed would protect me no matter what. Later that day, my lawyer walked me through the next steps. He explained how the parents' actions, coercing a signature, falsifying documents, claiming temporary transfer, constituted fraud. The law was firmly on my side. "They might try to argue it was for your sister's well-being," he said, "but legality doesn't bend for favoritism or manipulation. You've done everything right." His reassurance should have made me feel triumphant, but instead I felt a complex mix of relief, anger, and sorrow. When the notice reached my parents, the first thing I noticed was their silence. There were no calls, no messages, only the sudden disappearance of confidence I had seen them wield all my life. They had assumed I would cry, give up, or storm off to a hotel indefinitely. Instead, I had organized evidence, involved a professional, and taken control. For the first time, they were on the defensive. My sister didn't understand at first. She had believed innocently that she was just moving into a temporary home. When she saw the legal letters and the bank freeze, her eyes widened in panic. I didn't know," she stammered. I thought they were just helping me." Her voice was trembling, and I realized she had been caught in the middle, unwittingly benefiting from a manipulation that wasn't her idea. I didn't feel anger toward her, not really. She was just a pawn in a game I had been forced to play. The parents, on the other hand, were a different story. Their carefully constructed facade of control had crumbled. I could see it in the way they paced the living room of my old family home, whispering to each other in panic. I could almost hear the fear in their minds. We underestimated her. She's serious. She knows. All the lessons they had tried to teach me about obedience, about submission, about always accepting their decisions, they were unraveling in front of them. That night, I sat in the hotel room, staring out at the city skyline, thinking about the strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow I felt. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about shouting or hurting anyone. It wasn't about proving them wrong in front of the world. It was about reclaiming what was mine with dignity and making them face the consequences of their choices. My lawyer had given me the means, but it was my resolve, my calm determination, that was the true power. I knew the next steps would be delicate. Conversations would have to be careful, boundaries would have to be enforced, and emotions would have to be managed. But I felt a quiet confidence I had never known. My parents could no longer dictate the rules. For the first time in my life, I was the one setting the terms. As I turned off the hotel lights that night, I whispered to myself, almost as a mantra, they thought I was weak. They thought I would comply. They thought I would cry in a hotel room and let it go. They were wrong. The fire inside me, the one that had been quietly burning since that first betrayal, now roared with clarity. I wasn't just taking back my home. I was taking back my dignity, my voice, and my power. And in the quiet darkness, I allowed myself the first small smile in weeks. They had underestimated me, and soon they would understand that I was someone who would not be silenced, someone who would not be overlooked, and someone who could win without losing her heart in the process. The day I returned to my penthouse, the weight of the past weeks pressed heavily on me. It wasn't just about the property anymore. It was about every slight, every favor they had denied me, every time they had whispered that I was secondary. As I turned the key in the lock, legally mine once more, I felt a strange combination of relief and quiet triumph. My parents' confidence had vanished, replaced with the fear of consequences they could no longer manipulate. When they arrived, the confrontation was inevitable. My mother tried her usual tactics, the gentle voice and the feigned sadness. "We only wanted what was best for your sister," she said, eyes brimming with tears, as if I could be swayed by her performance. My father remained stiff, defensive, his face tight with anger, barely restrained. But this time, I felt no fear. I had spent nights preparing, documenting every transaction, every falsified document, every violation of trust. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. The law, the evidence, and my own resolve were enough. My sister appeared timid, clearly nervous and overwhelmed. She hadn't realized how far my parents had pushed things, how much they had relied on her pregnancy to justify taking my home. I didn't mean," she began, her voice shaking. I stopped her gently. I wasn't angry at her. She was a part of the family system, manipulated just like I had been. I know, I said softly. This isn't about you. This is about boundaries, about fairness, and about respect. I handed them the folder my lawyer had compiled. The sheer weight of it seemed to hit them physically, as if the papers themselves carried the consequences of their actions. They leafed through the documents in silence, their earlier smugness replaced by a tense, almost palpable fear. Every misstep, every lie, every act of favoritism laid bare in black and white. They had taken something that was mine, thinking I would simply bow and move on. For the first time, they understood that I wouldn't. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene of anger. Sweet revenge, I realized, didn't come from yelling or punishment. It came from reclaiming what was yours and letting the truth speak for itself. I set the folder down, looking each of them in the eye. This penthouse is mine. My life is mine. I will not let anyone take that from me again. The words felt heavier than any threat I could have made. My sister nodded, tears in her eyes, finally understanding the scope of what had happened. My parents' silence was deafening. Their control had crumbled, and they had no room left to maneuver. I could see the fear in their expressions, the realization that their favoritism, their manipulation, their assumptions about my compliance had failed them completely. After they left, I stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, touching the corners of my home. I ran my hands over the furniture I had carefully chosen, over the walls I had painted, over the memories etched into every surface. It was still mine, and this time nothing could take it away. The real revenge wasn't in their discomfort or in the letters from the lawyer. It was in my regained independence, my restored dignity, and the quiet knowledge that I had faced betrayal and come out stronger. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. I poured a cup of tea, stood by the window, and watched the city glow beneath me. They had thought I could afford a hotel, thought I would silently accept their decision, but I had learned something far more important. Power, self-respect, and justice can't be bought. They have to be claimed. And now I had claimed mine. I smiled, not with malice, but with peace. The penthouse, my life, and my voice were finally mine again. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I knew one truth above all. Betrayal may break the heart, but courage, patience, and clarity can rebuild it stronger than ever.